So please take over.
Okay, thank you, Joachim. AIESEC.
What's up?
What's up?
Yeah, it's been a long while, you know, being on an AIESEC platform, apart from sitting on board meetings, AIESEC national board meetings. So it's definitely a privilege and an honor to meet the alumni and have this conversation. So when I was approached to talk about something, I was like, listen, what am I going to talk about that AIESEC has done already? Or is there not, are there not, better speakers and more experts in AIESEC than I am? But they're like, oh, listen, you can even tell us what you're doing with your life currently and how you probably can inspire other people. So I said, okay, no problem. I think I've discovered a passion, I've discovered a purpose, and I feel the need to share that with AIESECers because that's what AIESEC is all about, following our passion and becoming change agents. So today, I just want to share with you what I'm doing at African Center for Economic Transformation on that topic, working with SMEs to drive a holistic economic transformation. So I'll be sharing my screen so we can take off. I think you may have to allow me to be able to share my screen so I can share my presentation.
You can share it, please.
Okay. Still.
Still?
Yeah.
You can try again.
Okay. Good. Okay, I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so let's go. Okay, so a little introduction about myself. I think Joachim tried to tell you something about me, but he got it wrong. I'm not a former AAG president, no. So let's say education-wise, so I attended University of Ghana for my first degree, and then off subsequently to the Nairobi Business University, where I did my MBA, and also had joined some MBA certificates from Kellogg, not Kellogg School of Management, and then also Remy University in China. So that's been my education. Afterwards, in terms of family life, I'm married. I have 4 boys, and that places a lot of responsibilities on me, to build something that they can be proud of as men for Africa. So my AIESEC life, I joined AIESEC in 2003, then became an LC, ED, then subsequently onto the MC. And then while on the MC, also had some roles, joining the brand principals team at the global level. And ever since, I've always been very close to AIESEC, and then subsequently joined the board. And I've been on the board for probably over 10 years, I guess. Career-wise, right from AIESEC, I joined Nestle Central in West Africa as a financial accountant. And then subsequently after my MBA, I changed careers a little bit and joined Pricewaterhouse, where I was a strategy and operations consultant, focus on strategy, operations, review, improvements, transformations for companies. And I'm giving this background because, like I said, what I'm doing currently is something that I feel strongly that is in line with my purpose in life. And all these background come together to give that meaning to it. So after working with PwC, I set out on my own, started a corporate secretarial and compliance business, and then subsequently another management consulting firm. So it was during my time with a management consulting firm where I was actually thinking of supporting small businesses, to give them the kind of support that the big businesses would pay PwC and all the big fours and all the big consulting firms to give them, to try and give that to them and support their growth. Because I've always believed that Africa's economic transformation, economic transformation lies within the SME space. So it was there then ACET, which is the African Center for Economic Transformation, reached out to me and talked about the fact that they are trying to set up a private sector development wing in the company, and they're really looking for someone with that kind of experience to help set that up and build the business. So the journey so far, joined ACET, just to give you a little bit about ACET. ACET is a Pan-African policy think tank. We say we are a think and do tank focused on economic transformation. And we've been at the forefront of economic transformation since it was founded in 2008. And we continue to evolve various approaches in terms of what we do around economic transformation. What we have done in the last 10 years prior to the private sector coming into place is to champion economic transformation to the point where African leaders subscribe to our definition of economic transformation. Now, when you talk about economic transformation, you can come up with a host of definitions. But then what ACET tried to do was to give a definition that gives descriptions of what it looks like an economy being transformed. I mean, taking examples from economies like South Korea, Malaysia, and co. We came up with a definition which African leadership has actually subscribed to, and which every year we come up with every 3 years, we come up with what we call the African Transformation Reports. And that tells the level of transformation that African economies are actually achieving. So that is pretty much what ACET has sought out to do. So our vision is it's an economically transformed Africa within a generation. And like I said, we help governments and businesses deliver this transformation, all with the purpose of improving lives. Now, this is what ACET eventually came up with as a description for transformation, that it is not enough to only grow when you hear companies, pride themselves that we've been growing at this rate. That growth is not enough until the economies themselves are diversified in terms of, if you look at the structural economy itself, there has to be diversification to support these economies against both external and internal shocks. So what we call this is that growth with depth, and the depth are the elements of the transformation that we look at for. And the first one is what I've described already, known as the diversification of our economies in terms of production, and then export diversification as well. And then also the second, countries that are transformed, or economies that are transformed, you see that their exports are quite competitive, and you see them on the global scale. So like when South Korea went through the process of economic transformation, you could see their products all over the world. They are very competitive right now. Their cars could actually compete with the European brands that are started decades before them. And what we also want to see, an economically transformed country, is that productivity levels are high in terms of output per labor. So skills are upgraded, to the extent that the productivity per capita is so high and it's comparable, and the growth that you see are not just shallow growth by virtue of having major, maybe major products that they export, especially for Africans exporting a lot of raw materials. And then also technological upgrade, throughout the economy to make production more efficient and cost effective so it can actually compete. Now, within all of these things, even when you're achieving this without having direct impact on the welfare and the well-being of your citizens, we think that you're not transforming. So what we do every 3 years is to come up with the African Transformation Report that tells the level of transformation for the countries. And so far, African countries in our last report are not transforming. So even for those that have a lot of good stories being told about them, if you dig deep into the numbers and the analysis, African economies are not transforming. Okay. Now, proud to the peers, which always, as in private sector development when being set up, ACET is focused on these 3 areas in terms of our analysis, that's using our research to critically analyze performance of countries, different sectors and different issues. And then we also give advice to government, and then we advocate for policy reforms based on the outcomes in our research work. And these are some of the things that we've, our theory of change in terms of our strategy. These are some of the works that have happened and are already impacting different countries or different economies and different sectors of the African economy itself. So enough with the old assets. After 10 years of existence, it's realized that yes, African governments are subscribed to the whole idea of transformation, but then it takes so much time to influence policy. Even when everyone is on board, it takes forever to influence policy before the policy will now be implemented on the ground to benefit the various stakeholders, such as the private sector and the well-being of its citizens. So we ACET developed what they call the Strategic Partnership for Private Sector Development and Growth. And this is where we believe that to drive a very holistic economic transformation for Africa, we need to start focusing directly with SMEs who actually form the bulk or the majority in terms of the productive sectors of our economies. So our aim is pioneering a partnership approach to private sector development, working with governments, but also more directly with the players on the field to drive economic transformation. Now, on the onset, there are 2 things that we're supposed to focus, but today I'll focus on just the local content SME programming. But we also, on the macro level, support governments to basically, in terms of export processing zones, how do we create sustainable export processing zones, to drive job creation and new businesses? But that is another story for another day. Today, like I said, we're just going to focus on the SME bit to let you know what we're doing and how that is helping other countries in Africa. Okay, so what do we know when it comes to the SME sector? We know that in most African, so this is Ghana, but it's actually most Africa economies have this characteristics or this structure in terms of the key players, except for South Africa, which is very interesting, but I guess also because there is a history to that, where the indigenes were not allowed to own businesses. So that has had some major impact on its structural economy as we speak. But beyond that, I think most African states are highly characterized by the informal sector, and they actually represent about 85% of businesses, and they employ about 80% of workforce, mostly in the manufacturing and distribution of in the manufacturing sector. And then in Ghana specifically, it's actually contributing to about 70% to GDP. Now, this is also not very different from other African countries, because I've been involved in a number of studies and dialogues with other African countries in this particular space, and the structure is pretty similar. Now, why this structural change, this structure is very important, as you know, SMEs actually form 90%. In Ghana, for example, they form 90% of all businesses registered, and they account for 90% of employment. Now, for every small, that's a tabletop kind of entrepreneurial business that is registered, this is not even talking about the informal, unregistered businesses. You would have 2 jobs on the average being created. Now, in the small businesses, they usually will create 2 jobs when a new small business is set up, while the medium would do an average of 46 jobs. To put these figures also in perspective, a study on Ghana in the last 10 years has shown that there's an average of up to 300,000 businesses registered that are SMEs. Now, if you put this structural distribution in terms of the job creation opportunity, that means that thousands of jobs that are potentially created every year as a result of the companies or new businesses being registered. And just keep that at the back of your mind, because this is what is going to, spur the conversation around economic transformation, creating jobs for Africa's burgeoning youth population, and all the issues that we have emanating also from our economic woes. Now, within the SME space itself, there are a number of challenges. One, if you speak to almost every SME, the first thing they tell you is access to finance. And even where they have access to finance, the high cost of capital is one of the things that really, limits businesses or limits African SMEs to be able to grow. Beyond those, there's also the weak institutional regulatory framework, where we haven't, as economies in Africa, focused on how to properly regulate and support the SME space. There's also high cost of doing business because of lack of infrastructure, high cost of utility, such as power and the rest. There's also very weak value chain integration, which is around which our units are now thinking we are improving to really drive the economic transformation. And then very minimal interaction among others. So these are some of the challenges that we see in Ghana within the SME space. And like I said, if you go to Africa, these challenges are quite similar. Those of you who are probably interested in a lot of the economic articles, you would realize that during the COVID, most of the articles that were written in terms of post-COVID recovery centered around how to strengthen SMEs to be able to recover better. Okay. Now, beyond these external challenges, also exist some internal challenges, such as weak management system, weak governance structures that these companies set up. And these things actually have some direct relationship to access to finance and access to right partnerships. Because if your governance structures are weak, if you have low productivity, if your business model itself is not well proven commercially, then it makes it difficult for any form of financing, whether PEs or equity, direct equity or debt, to be put into those companies to grow. Now, you would realize that Ghana and all, we have done this study across West Africa, but generally even across Africa, there's a whole ecosystem of SME support, where you have incubators, you have even governments running their own finance and training support and all of that. In Ghana, what you see on the screen is more or less a snapshot of the whole ecosystem, where we have about 153 non-financial support providers, 91 financial support providers, then 6 other ecosystem support providers. And then these are, you find them all across our country as per the map that you see before you. This is very similar in most West African countries where our ecosystem study also considered, where you realize that a number of these activities are taking place. But the issue we found out, but let me take a step back. The reason why we do all of these things is that in ACET, because we are very heavy with the research, we want to make sure that if we're going to do anything within the SME support space, it has to be anchored in sound analytics and research. And so before we even came out, we are taking our time to understand the whole ecosystem of SMEs and the structural economies of Africa. This also continues to be some of the major players within the SME support space. I mean, supporting businesses by way of incubation, accelerators by way of general management and technical training support and all of that. So you have all these within the ecosystem, and most of them look at objectives around capacity building, access to financial services, helping internal productivity, growth, and all of that. And all of them are playing their role. But what we found out was that after speaking with a number of these players, there was no focus or coordinated, direction for all these activities to actually have an impact. So to give you an example, you would have, let's say, that a Stanford seed that decides its own sectors to support, decides what kind of entrepreneurs that they're going to support. They have all of that. You have, is it Meltwater? They also have their own criteria. Then you have players like Andy and Co would focus on research and other stuff. But what we realized was that all these things are not very coordinated. And so to drive economic transformation, working within the SME space, that we needed some form of coordination. And that is where we felt that being a research organization, and also having defined what economic transformation was, then we're able to now direct all the efforts within the ecosystem towards a common goal. So, for example, if Ghana decides that we're going to focus on, let's say, 5 sectors, then within the ecosystem and its value chain, all the efforts by all these players can be focused on these sectors, to see some real impact in 5 years, rather than you choosing sectors that are not government priorities and then putting in your investment or putting in some resources that will yield very minimal results. We, like I said, because of our research background, we also undertook a number of studies reviewing industrial industrialization and other related policies. We look at innovation across the countries that we're working in, and then one study that actually kind of helps us to coordinate those efforts, that is for each country that we're working in, we're going to undertake what we call the product space study. Now, the product space study, using statistics, is able to tell us which sectors that countries or economies could actually spend very minimal resources in achieving economic diversification in terms of the structural economism. So, for example, in Ghana, when we did a product space studies, we realized that cosmetics is one of the areas that Ghana could actually focus on and diversify its economy, to prevent itself against certain external and internal shocks. So, and all these studies, we do them to give us insights as to the decisions we take when we're talking about economic transformation, working with SMEs. Now, so what is our program design, and how are we delivering that transformation journey for SMEs and for economies that we work in? Like I said, when we undertake the product space study and we understand which products and sectors that would help countries to achieve, the diversification, as well as other economic metrics such as import substitution, and then also drive exports, we undertake an extensive value chain analysis to understand the value chains of these sectors in a way that we are able to now come up with real opportunities that businesses could be developed around. And so using the value chain approach, we develop new businesses as well as work with existing businesses to try and grow them, driving this diversification agenda, as well as other economic metrics. So, as I said, because of our research capabilities, we are currently trying to play a thought leadership role where our research is where we come up with, certain analysis to show that, okay, if the ecosystem focuses on this particular sector or these sectors, Ghana or the countries that we're working in could achieve, those growth with depth elements that I showed you before. And so we are using our research work and our analytics, and then also our convening power, bringing people, having a lot of dialogues and bringing people to the table to drive some sort of a thought leadership that would harmonize efforts within the SME support ecosystem. Now, the whole objective for our work or design is to add two things: to develop a pipeline of investment-ready local content SMEs, and then also increase the number of African SMEs integrated into global value chains. Now, when we say developing a pipeline of investment-ready SMEs, like I said, then most SMEs will note financing as one of its major problems. So, and meanwhile, when you go in to assess them, to be able to give them financing, you realize that these people are not ready at all. So for the existing companies, to support them through a number of modules, which I'll be showing you subsequently, to become investment ready, okay? And then we also help them raise financing into the companies to grow them to the next level. And while we're doing that, we're also giving them capacity, building capacity and helping them to integrate into these global value chains, especially the value chains of big enterprises that exist in their countries. So for example, if we're working along the mining value chain, we're looking at what other services or opportunities that Ghanaian companies could actually provide to the big enterprises without the big enterprises looking to the international community. So they are not supposed to be forced based on just local content to source from local companies. But then we give support to these companies and help them to increase productivity, increase in terms of raise the standards for their products, and make them very competitive on the global scale so that they actually become more interesting for these big enterprises to source from them. And so we have developed two, the business incubation and then the acceleration modules. The acceleration is where we work with the existing companies within the value chains that we've identified and give them, make them investment ready, and then give them, the technical and managerial support to be able to now start supplying into the value chains of, big enterprises or the global value chain. Now, what we do with the accelerators is that we also work with other institutions across Africa. So in this particular case, in trying to select our SMEs, we work with the Venture Capital for Africa, VC4A, which I'm sure most of you know already, where we work with them to use their tools, in a scientific basis to try and select companies that applied into our program. Now, once they are selected, we undertake a robust review or diagnosis of these companies. And then based on the outcome of these diagnoses, we offer both technical, managerial or management advisory support services to them. Now, they don't have to pay it for anything because this program is being sponsored for. But then what we're looking forward to do in the future is that anybody that goes through the program and is successful should also give back into the program to support other SMEs. We also provide some mentorship and coaching. Now, we have separated the two because for us, the kind of mentoring we are providing to our African SMEs is not a typical mentoring where you have someone work with the companies. We call it inspirational mentorship because if it comes, one of the issues we found out looking at the whole ecosystem space is that even where SMEs themselves are struggling and putting in all the effort, investing and trying to, break into value chains, you would realize that most often than not, the big businesses would try to sabotage or stifle their effort. So what these inspirational mentors do, that these are very successful business executives and business leaders, as well as also political and international development leaders who come together and offer some sort of, opening the door, working with, talking to government to look at certain policies that have been long overdue. So these guys actually speak to the corridors of power, and we're bringing them together to support the SMEs that we put into our program. Then the coaching is actually where you have real people who spend time, like shadow CEOs, to work with the SMEs. The program also provides some financial support to directly support their activities. Now, I'll give you an example for you to understand. So it's not like, okay, we just give you $10,000 for $20,000 like the other programs do. When we come in after your diagnosis, if there's a specific need that could easily transform your operations, and those needs require direct financing, we will do that within our means. So one of the companies that we have selected currently, for example, has a contract to supply millions of tons of cassava starch to AB InBev, which is one of the world's biggest brewery companies. But this guy really doesn't have what it takes. Now, working with local technicians, he was able to design a plant. He was able to design a plant which cost him about $50,000 that could completely change his fortunes. And please, KCD, can you mute your, Okay, thank you. And so such a person, when we go in after the diagnosis, we're not going to waste his time by just taking him to a long technical managerial support services. We give him the $50,000, set the plant up, start producing, makes money immediately, and then he can put some money back into the value chain. So that's the kind of financing, financial support that we talk about. Now, after you've gone through the whole, after companies have gone through the whole process, that received technical support, managerial, we look at your governance, and you are now investment ready. We also provide transactions advisory support services where consultants and investment firms actually work with you to raise funds for these companies. Now, this is for the existing companies. So as I mentioned, the incubation, we have an incubation model. The incubation model is also pretty different from what typical incubators do. So typical incubators would invite ideas from entrepreneurs and help them build that idea to proof of concept. That's not what we do. Now, based on the companies we've selected and the value chains that we've analyzed, we now look at specific opportunities within the value chain, and then we set up businesses around them on the back of offtake agreements and contracts, which makes it easy to now bring in investors. So I'll give you an example. In the cohorts that have been selected, we have a number of companies that are processing foods, agro-processing. Now, one of their challenges is on the supply chain. Who is going to supply them with the right grade of grains to be able to produce? Now, we help these companies to have contracts. So for example, one of our companies that we're working with, as we're currently helping them to get a contract with the FAO or one of these UN institutions to produce or supply baby foods and other cereals to certain zones that have been hit by hunger. So these are $1 million worth of contracts. Now, because we have this kind of contract, we now set up a company within the value chain to make it efficient by fixing the supply chain need that these two agro-processing companies have. So that's what we do at the incubation level, that based on the market opportunity we create for our existing accelerator companies, we set up businesses who would make the value chain or the supply chain efficient enough to keep these businesses sustainable. Now, why do we do this? We do this, let me give you 2 key reasons. Number 1 is on the fact that most research has shown that some some companies that go through incubation sometimes are not able to raise financing because of the entrepreneur's own attitude or their own thinking, their perspective around getting partners into the businesses. Now, if we start a new business, our intention is not to keep it, is to spin it off immediately on the back of real market opportunity, commercial viability. So based on this commercial viability, we now bring in investors that have the right capabilities and the right financing to drive this business opportunity. Now, what that does for us is that we are able to also secure the job creation potential that we talk about. So if we set new businesses based on the statistics that I gave you, if it is a small business, it means that minimum it has a potential to create 6 jobs immediately. So for every cohort, the accelerator companies themselves, based on their growth, we look at them providing about 10 jobs. So 100 jobs even on this pilot. And then within the incubation, 6 jobs per company. When they become real businesses, they can create more jobs. So we try to fuse in all these elements around economic transformation into the work that we're doing. On the screen, the first cohorts, the 10 companies that were selected, and each of them has very interesting stories and why they made it to the cohort and what kind of contributions that they bring to the group, to the group, and how all of these groups together help strengthen the value chains that we selected them from. One of them is Grotal Agro Processing. This guy is doing dry fruits. He's approached some international retail shops, and we're going to help him meet those standards and start supplying. Now, immediately immediately we say he's ready to supply. What it means is that the value chain or the supply chain must be strong enough to give him the raw materials to be able to feed into all these chains in Europe. And we are talking about hundreds of thousands of tons of these products going to these retail shops. Oduoom Foods is also already a Ghanaian company into already exporting and canning palm products from the palm tree, so different products. Also currently, because she didn't have capabilities to directly export, people were just buying and making a lot of money off her, and these are like individual entrepreneurs. Now, if we help her to build export capabilities, immediately she can increase the number of jobs being created. And within her ecosystem already, she's working with like women, widows, and all of that. And we're looking at hundreds of jobs to be further created by the support that we give them. All of these guys have similar stories. And for me, what is driving this is, the passion that we see that others are doing well, and in them doing very well, they are actually providing opportunities for the less privileged and making life comfortable and meaningful for people. So that is pretty much around what one area that we're working with, especially on the SMEs, but other activities that we are involved, which also further strengthen the work we're doing within the SME space, include, so let me just touch base a little bit on the investment readiness. Now, if you look at investment readiness, every company or most investors will have their own framework to assessing companies. And especially if you have the Wall Street type of companies that they come in with very rigid investment readiness checklists. And most often than not, when investors look at African companies, they say, oh, you're nowhere close to this. Now, there's a catch in there. You will still see them investing, but the more they see gaps in the due diligence, the more they are able to beat down the value of your company. So what we want to do as part of the work we're doing, is to create an African-centric investment readiness certification framework, where we can actually get countries to sign on so that their companies, any SME or any company in Africa, could actually subject itself to an investment readiness testing online using our framework. And then when they have certain gaps identified, they can reach out to us or reach out to any support group to help them close these gaps. Now, what this does is that if countries already have an investment ready pipeline, when investors come to Africa, they now will be forced to work with companies that would now drive real transfer of knowledge, transfer of technology, and transfer of technical capabilities. What is happening currently is that you see big companies come in. First of all, they evade the investment in terms of the size of investment they are supposed to put in by having someone to front as a Ghanaian or as an African, so that the investment amount required will become what the JV requires. Now, what happens is that whenever you do this, you deprive the country of real technology and knowledge transfer, because if it is not a company that can take on the new knowledge, the technical capabilities, and the transfer, investors are footloose, and anytime they decide to leave, they leave, and the economies don't benefit. So the National and Regional Investment Readiness Certification is to now try and get a consensus across Africa using our investments, an African-centric investment readiness framework that already understands the African situation and is able to now tick the boxes that these investors usually will request. Most often than not, some of the things they may request would actually even be in existence, but they may not be properly organized. You need to speak to these SMEs to be able to understand that, oh, they're actually doing a very good reporting, but they're not doing it in a way that the investment checklist is asking. And then eventually, once that is done, Africa itself will start to dictate. The reason Africa needs to do this is that we are creating the largest common market. And very soon, which is already started, you would see big investors, the big companies that have the muscles in terms of finance, taking over the market if we do not structure and work together as Africans. And eventually, lastly on our framework, we also want to build our own fund that will start to look at the SMEs that go through our program and support them. And these two funds that you see on the screen are things that we're currently working on. Other activities in supporting the SME and the export sector, we're currently training, working with 200 companies in Ghana on 19 best practices that we developed with a Swiss university. It's already piloted in Argentina, and we're doing that in Ghana. We're going to go to Rwanda. We're going to replicate that in Rwanda, and we're also replicating it in a couple of countries that have reached out to us to work with them. We're also studying how national development banks could actually be used to drive economic transformation by providing, patient capital to drive the growth within the SME space. We're also one of the consortium partners on the jobs and economic transformation in Ghana, the program that is ongoing, and we're supporting the government of Ghana to do this. And we're doing other things within the cocoa value chain, all linked to the whole value chain approach in developing SMEs. And then we've also looked at non-trade tariff measures, faced by UK companies. So this was done specifically for the UK government. But then we are also taking cue from it as Africans to look at how we ourselves are hindering our own growth, by putting in place these non-tariff measures that usually do not find themselves in the books, but purely through attitudes, and it stops trade between African countries. So not to bore you, I guess and I'm speaking to you as an AIESEC, that we got to be proud of ourselves that in less than 18 months, The department, like I said, has been set up and we're doing all the things that I've told you about. We work out three full-time staff working with me, and I usually work with a lot of consultants. I've worked with over 60 consultants, so this is a bit outdated. We've done a number of studies, and we've also published some research work that, within the space that we're working. And our work here has already brought in non-donor funded of almost $1 million. And like I said, we're expanding to Rwanda, Liberia, and we're also beginning some work in Ethiopia. Yeah, so this is probably some of the achievements that we've been able to do in the last 18 months of our existence. And we've partnered with a lot of other institutions in Ghana and beyond. So my friends, my AIESECers, if this is of any interest, this is what I've been delivering in the last 18 months. And I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing because I feel it's in line with my purpose as a change agent. And we're happy to contribute a bit to the growth of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charles, for this wonderful presentation. I mean, I believe that each and everyone here has learned something and we all have questions. So
Yes.
Yes, I have my own question that I'll be asking, but I would like the members to do so. Hey, AIESEC, this is the floor. It's for you now. If you have any question, you can unmute yourself and ask by first raising your hand at the reactions. You just raise your hand so that we give you the floor. Okay, so, oh, thank you, Vincent. Vincent is thanking you. So if you have question, you can unmute yourself in case you are not finding the reaction place where you can raise your hand. Any question for Mr. Okay, so we have a person. You can unmute yourself, please. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Please, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Nicodemus. Yeah. Hello, sir. I want to thank you for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Sir, my question is about real estate. I know a friend who wants to go into it, but his issue has to do with finance. You spoke about project finance. I want to ask if there is any way such people can be supported as SMEs. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Do we take some more questions or do you want me to just answer?
So we would wait for, like, in case someone has a question, the person can ask. If not, then you can answer him for us, please. I think you can answer him. Okay, we have a person, Patrick.
Okay.
Yeah, Patrick, you can unmute yourself, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oduoom. That was very thought-provoking. I don't know if I missed this, but I wanted to ask about, is it that if you have an entrepreneurship idea, then you apply to your company, and then maybe the entrepreneur now goes through the application or acceptance process, or we need a business plan before we can apply? I missed how somebody can sign on or join to maybe get access to export or funding or expansion or business capability in any form.
Okay.
Okay, you can answer them for us.
Yes, so let me take, yeah, so the first question is talking about having a real estate idea and how to raise money for it. Anyway, I would attempt to answer this because I myself have invested in that area a little bit. But you see, the housing sector has huge deficit, but there's still very little or no interesting concept around low-cost housing that will really, break the market. Otherwise, if you're already in Accra, and I assume Kwesidi is Ghanaian and it's already based in Accra, and you would realize that there's a lot of unoccupied properties sitting, and meanwhile mortgages are quite very high, and because of that, it's very difficult to access financing to develop, new housing. But there are still other financing institutions that will look at your business model. If it makes sense and it will make money for them, they will look at it. Otherwise, the real estate sector in Ghana is one of the very toughest, which I would advise that unless you have a winning model that makes it very profitable for investors to put their money in, then it will be very difficult at this stage. I'm giving you the realities in the environment. Mortgage financing alone is quite high, very high. It's almost 15, 16% on the dollar. So if you build houses, who's going to take them? If you want to go to the commercial space, there's still a lot of commercial spaces available that are unoccupied right here. Unless you identify a niche and a business model that really, in terms of turnover, has a very short turnover and also makes money for investors. Otherwise, it's not an easy proposition just saying you're into real estate, unless you give me more information about what you're doing and what is unique within the market.
Thank you very much, sir. I guess that's okay. That's okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Now, on the how to access our support. So, as I mentioned, so we are not necessarily, we do not just open our doors and say everybody should come in. Like I mentioned earlier in my presentation, everything we do is heavily anchored in research work, and that is that's what we bring to the table. So based on our research, we decide, what the direction, that the numbers are telling us that if we go this way, we're going to be able to drive real transformation for the economies that we're working in. So currently, the sectors that we have selected, those are the sectors that we invite companies from to apply. Now, we do that by, putting out a campaign where we give maybe a timeline for applicants to apply. Now, when you apply, there's a lot of information you provide, and based on that information, we do some initial selection, and then from the short list, we actually start fiscal engagement and validate the information that you've given us. So after the validation, we look at those companies that have the highest potential to actually not only grow on their own, but also based on their growth, drive a lot of growth within the value chain that we work in. So from time to time, we will open applications, and the application will have very clear guidelines and criteria for selection. I don't know if that answers you.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and then there are other general supports that we also open applications for. So for example, the 200 companies we're working with, we open it up to company, and we had probably over 350 companies applying. So that is for a specific support system. That's export readiness and export competitiveness. So companies that are exporting apply, and once they are selected, they get that kind of support from us. And it's also very, very scientific. So we do that working with a control group, which are similar companies that to see whether our interventions are really yielding results before we do whatever we do.
Okay, thank you. I think Patrick asked my question. and you've answered it. Is there anybody here who would like to ask a question to? You are welcome to ask any question that you have. Okay. I think nobody has a question. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
I think I had my new AIESEC family from Rwanda.
Yeah.
Is Vincent online?
Yeah, Vincent is
Yes.
here.
Okay.
Yes.
So just to say thank you for joining. So I met Vincent when I was in Rwanda, and these guys, man, that's the AIESEC spread. I ate the best ugali I've ever eaten. So thank you again, Vincent.
You're most welcome, Charles. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Welcome, Vincent.
Welcome, my brother. Thank you so much.
Okay, any question? Well, no question for us. Before we end, I would like to say a big thank you to Mr. Charles for accepting this invitation and also for presenting your work to us. I mean, we've learned a lot and you were able to answer all our questions. I know that majority of us were having doubts on how to apply and you've answered it for us. And to all of us who joined too, I will say thank you. But don't forget, we will be sharing it. In majority of us couldn't get the opportunity to join. We'll share it on our YouTube page. Make sure you go there in case you came late. You can go there and watch it again. Then believe in the power of sharing. The power of sharing, which means I would like each and every one here to share it on his or her social media pages. I know that you have at least 500 people. So if you share it, someone would also share it or someone would like it. And you impact in someone's life. That's what I would like you to do. So thank you once again. And I will call on AIESEC Alumni Ghana President if he has anything for us. So Mr. Jermaine.
Before Jermaine takes the floor, I want to extend my appreciation to AIESEC Alumni in Ghana for organizing this space. And I would like to thank Charles for such a wonderful session. It's very inspirational and it gives hope for the future of work in Africa. And so it's a wake-up call for every individual who has joined and those who also learn about this presentation and what it all is about. So I thank you so much and God bless you so much.
Yeah, calls for drum rolls. So Mr. President, if you are here, okay, he's having problem unmuting himself. Okay. So he's having problem unmuting himself. So we will end here. And as I said, make sure you share it for us. Thank you once again and hope to see you in our next talk. Bye-bye and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.